You're listening to the Place We Find Ourselves podcast. I'm Adam Young, and today's episode is focused on why you need to engage your story in order for your brain to heal. And I want to begin today by sharing some of my personal journey in coming to explore and address my own story. It wasn't until I was about 35 years old that I was introduced to the idea that I even had a story. Up until that time, I would have told you that I had some memories from my growing up years, some of them good, some of them bad, but none of the memories that I had registered as significant to me. I didn't necessarily understand the stories. That is, I couldn't make sense of the memories that I had, but it really didn't matter to me because I didn't feel like I needed to understand them. They were just odd anecdotes, snippets of memory that really didn't have any bearing on my present life. You probably also have similar snippets of memories, fragments, portions of stories that you remember. There are pieces of your stories that you likely remember, or you would soon be able to, if you flip through a photo album. Perhaps you've dismissed most of the stories that you do remember as irrelevant to your present life, just like I did. Rewind 15 years from age 35, mid 30s, to age 20. I'm a student at the College of William and Mary, and ever since I arrived at college, I had been experiencing increasing levels of anxiety and depression. In other words, emotional pain, it just became a frequent companion to me as I began college. And when it got severe enough, I would put my Bible and a journal in my backpack, and I would ride my bike to a place called Lake Matoka, which was a secluded lake at the edge of the campus. I hiked into the woods, I found a private spot, and I began what would become a very familiar endeavor. What was that endeavor? I would voraciously read the Bible, desperately looking for answers to questions such as, if Jesus loves me, why do I feel so much pain so often? Or what is wrong with my insides? What's wrong with me? Other people don't seem to be experiencing the anxiety and the depression that I do. So what are they doing that I'm not doing? Now, at church, the church I attended, InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, both of these places told me that Jesus was the person that my heart was most looking for and most needed, and that the Bible would help me to know Jesus. And so I went to Lake Matoka with frequency, desperately seeking Jesus and earnestly devouring the Bible, looking for help. College came and went. My 20s came and went. Into my 30s, 15 years passed, and little had changed in my anguished heart. So by the time I was 35 years old, I had tried what felt like everything: books, conferences, mentors, lots of mentors, Bible studies, journaling, prayer, counseling. I did therapy. I did all of it. And I don't just mean like a few books. I didn't dabble, okay? I don't just mean a few meetings with mentors. I mean hundreds of books, several years of weekly meeting with mentors, older men that could teach me how to make sense of what was happening inside of me. And of course, innumerable pages written in my journal. But more than any of those endeavors, what I did more than anything else was I prayed and I read the Bible. I would ask, seek, and knock, pleading with God for help, year in and year out for my entire 20s, well into my 30s. And by the time I was 35 years old, I had done everything I knew to answer this simple question: how do I make it hurt less inside? How do I get well? Now, around this time, someone gave me a copy of a book by Dan Allender called The Wounded Heart, The Wounded Heart. And this book was my introduction to story work. It was my introduction to the idea that I had a story. Dan's book, The Wounded Heart, suggested that my story was not just something in my past, okay, but it was also profoundly affecting my present day-to-day life. And it was while I was reading The Wounded Heart that I began thinking to myself, okay, maybe understanding my past story could help me discover why I was having so much trouble in the present in my day-to-day life. Now, what about you? You may have tried everything you know to find healing, to grow, to mature, but have you explored your story? Exploring your story means a lot more than writing down your life narrative and journaling about it. A band that I like, the Counting Crows, have a song called Round Here. And there's a lyric in that song that moves me deeply. And it goes like this. Then she looks up at the building and says she's thinking of jumping. She says she's tired of life. She must be tired of something. Many of us are tired of something, exhausted by something. What if much of your exhaustion is caused by running from your story? What if much of your exhaustion, your tiredness, your fatigue is caused by running from the story that is yours? And now, by running from your story, I simply mean ignoring how your past, particularly in your family of origin, might be affecting your present, whether you're 25, 35, 65. You may have tried, like me, many, many things to heal, to grow. Sadly, it is very possible to read great books, to attend helpful conferences, to participate in myriad Bible study groups, even do therapy with a decent therapist, and still not engage your story in depth. Most books, most Bible studies, most conferences focus on information transfer, okay, which leans heavily on the belief that right information will lead to right living. And unfortunately, lots of counseling stops there as well. But information alone is not going to heal your heart. Information, why? Because information alone does not change the deeper layers of your brain. My invitation to you today is simple, and it is this: to take your story seriously as God takes it. Engaging your story, particularly from your growing up years, is the single most important thing you can do to experience healing in your brain. Engaging your story will take you further into healing and growth than what's commonly known as traditional talk therapy, okay? Talk therapy, more often than not, allows you to remain safely disconnected from the parts of you that hold deep feelings, unmet longings, and disturbing bodily sensations. Okay, traditional talk therapy allows you to remain safely distant from that stuff. However, if you start to talk about particular scenes from your story, you will soon start to feel deep feelings. You will soon start to connect with unmet longings. And you will soon start to experience important bodily sensations. In other words, you will connect to the deeper layers of your brain, the portion of your brain that's known as the limbic brain. And this is where you need to be to experience healing and growth. Now, look, it is easy, so easy. I did this for decades, to berate yourself for what you imagine is wrong with you. But what if every symptom makes sense? What if every symptom that you have is telling a story? What if every symptom you have points back to a story from your growing up years that has something pivotal to teach you, a gift for you? There was a reason that I was feeling so much anxiety in college. There was a reason that I walked around that campus feeling like something was wrong with me. And likewise, there is a reason for whatever symptoms you bear in your body, whatever they are. There's a reason your life feels the way that it does. And there's a reason that you're stuck in the places that you're stuck in. And that reason, or said better, those reasons will be found by exploring your story, particularly your story in your family of origin. All human beings, me, you, all of us, were designed to experience what the Hebrew Bible calls shalom. Okay, shalom. Theologian Cornelius Plantinga defines shalom as the webbing together of God, humans, and all creation in justice, fulfillment, and delight. In other words, you were made for justice, for fulfillment, and for delight. You experience what the Bible calls shalom when there is peace, harmony, and delight in 4 areas: between you and you, peace, harmony, and delight; between you and other people, peace, harmony, and delight; between you and the earth, that's 3; and between you and your creator, that's the 4th area. Now, interpersonal neurobiologists use the word integration to describe peace, harmony, and delight in these 4 areas. When the various regions of your brain and your body are well connected, i.e., integrated, you experience intra-personal shalom, you and you. When you are meaningfully connected with the important people in your life, you experience interpersonal shalom, you and other people. And when you are in a connected, harmonious relationship with the earth, you experience shalom with the land, with your environment. And when you are meaningfully connected to your creator, you experience shalom with God. Now, when these 4 elements of connection are in place, you experience a fullness of life, a vitality. It's the way things are meant to be. The Bible calls this shalom. Interpersonal neurobiologists call this integration. It's the same thing. They're getting at the same idea. It's what we all want. It's what we were all created for. So I said all of that to say this. There is a way to move from disconnection to connection in these 4 areas. There is a way to move from disintegration to integration. There is a way to move from symptoms to shalom in these 4 areas. All right. There is a way to experience more shalom / integration within yourself, you and you. There's a way to experience more shalom / integration between you and the other important people in your life, with the earth and with God. How? The starting point is this. You have to make sense of your story. Now, what do I mean when I say your story? Okay, for years, I didn't think I had a story. I certainly had no notion that my past experiences in life were affecting my present day-to-day life. Now, you may not think of your past story as significant at all for your present, but I don't know how to put this. You would be wrong. Okay. It is massively significant. More than any other single factor, your past story, which is to say the experiences you have had in life, is responsible for the way your brain operates today, more than any other single factor. But what exactly is your story? What do I mean by that? Well, your story refers to the experiences that you have had in life, particularly during your growing up years. When most people think of their story, they think of an overarching narrative of their life from like birth until 18, usually from like a bird's eye perspective. If you were 30,000 feet up in the air and you were looking down on your town, on the town that you live in, you could describe what you see and your description would be accurate. Okay. It just wouldn't be very detailed or very helpful. Many people, likewise, tell their story at 30,000 feet. So, example, here's a 30,000-foot telling of my story. My dad was a workaholic and didn't spend much time with me or my brothers. When he wasn't working, he was outside with his plants. I was much closer to my mom than I was to my dad. I got good grades in school to earn my dad's approval, but it never got me what I really wanted, namely a father who was involved in my life. Now, that's my story, and it's true. It's a 30,000-foot recounting of my life story, which is true, but it's not what I mean right now when I talk about your story. Okay, what I mean, what I'm inviting you to ponder and to put words to and to write out is far more about the individual scenes that you still remember from your growing up years. That day on the soccer field in third grade that you still remember. That time your mom finally stood up to your dad. That time you forgot about a school assignment and you asked your mom to get you poster board, and when she left the house, your dad lost his temper and hit you. Okay? When I say your story, I'm talking about the individual scenes, not the 30,000-foot overarching narrative of your life. When you recount a particular scene, when you tell me about a moment, an incident, a scene, you are telling a story on the ground level rather than telling it at 30,000 feet. If I only had 2 hours to spend with you, I would much rather hear one of your stories told on the ground level than hear lots and lots of your stories as you tell me the overarching life narrative at 30,000 feet. Okay, why would I rather spend the 2 hours that way? Because I can be way more helpful to you if you give me one ground level story than if you give me a 30,000-foot overview. Why? Why? Because trauma resides in the details. It doesn't reside in the big picture. When you offer a 30,000-foot telling of your story, you are able to remain, shall we say, comfortably distant from the big emotions that you would feel if you just told one of your stories on the ground level. In fact, you really don't even have a story. You have stories, plural, lots of them. When you offer a 30,000-foot telling of your story, more often than not, it's a cover-up. I'm not saying you're lying. You're just omitting the details of the events that have wounded you, quite likely. But when you offer a ground level telling of a particular scene, suddenly the crime scene comes into sharper focus. The time you were 11 years old, your dad was drunk at your birthday party, and he said that cruel thing to you, and you were humiliated in front of your friends, and you still remember it 30 years later. The time when your younger brother tracked mud through the house, and your dad violently beat him while you stood in the doorway of your room, helplessly watching and hearing your brother scream. Okay? Those are scenes. And even as I narrate them, And I'm sorry for the jarring intrusion, but even as I narrate them, you can probably feel in your body the difference between a 30,000 foot overview and a particular on the ground level description of something wounding. What are one or two of the individual scenes from your story that you still remember? Now, any good story has a variety of settings, plot lines, characters, and themes. Those four: settings, plot, character, themes. The story of your life is no different. Okay? Think of all the settings that compose your life story. You know, the hospital room that you were delivered in when you first came into the world, your kindergarten class, the first soccer team you played on, your piano recital when you were 10 years old, junior prom, the room in your house where that really bad thing happened that your family never talks about. Those are settings. And then there are all the characters that make an appearance in the epic story that is your life. Characters, your parents, your siblings, grandparents, uncles and aunts, your second grade teacher, your basketball coach, violin instructor, the neighbor kids who live down the street, your first boyfriend or girlfriend. You get the point. Now, here's the thing. We tend to focus on the characters in our story who were always there. But what about the characters that entered your story for a short season, but played an important role? All right, did you, for example, have a teacher or a coach, an instructor, a band teacher, whatever it is, whatever you did you have someone who cared deeply for you during a particularly hard season of your life? Rick Wilson was my young life leader for 3 years in high school. Relatively speaking, Rick and I spent very little time together, but Rick loved me, and I knew it. I knew it. His impact on my heart is incalculable. But he was not a common character in the story of my life. And I've had virtually no contact with him since I graduated from high school. But when I think about the people in my story who truly loved me, his name is on the top of the list. Finally, there are the characters in your story who should have played a much more significant role, but were largely absent. Don't underestimate absence. One of the biggest characters in your story may be the absence of someone that you desperately needed. Okay, that's characters. In addition to the characters, you've got plot, right? Your story has innumerable plot lines that hold the story together. What do I mean? Look, there's the plot line of your relationship with your father. What are the pivotal moments in your relationship with your father, in the plot line of that relationship? What moments made that relationship what it was in the past and what it is today? What conversations? What incidents? And what about you and your mom? What is the plot line of your relationship with your mom or your stepmom or whoever raised you? If you were to storyboard your relationship with that person, and you could only include one scene for each year of your growing up years, your life, 1, 2, 3, one scene for each year, which scenes would make it onto the storyboard? And then there's the plot line of your love life, of all the people that you dated or didn't date. If you're married, your marriage has a story. And if you never married or you haven't yet, one of the plot lines in your story pertains to what it has been like for you to be single in a world that privileges married people. And if you're divorced, there is the plot line of the devastation or the release, or both, from your previous marriage and the war with hope as you consider risking marriage again. I mean, do you not see the myriad plot lines that are part of your story? Now, the fundamental, in my opinion, plot line of your story pertains to what you have done with your desires and what you have done with your disappointments. Desires and disappointments. If I asked you to write out your life story solely through the lens of desire, desires met and desires unmet, what would the chapter titles be? The most agonizing and the most fulfilling plot lines of your story are those pertaining to your desires and your disappointments. And I am much more interested in the deep desires of your heart than I am interested in what you have accomplished in your life. I don't want to minimize your accomplishments. They matter immensely, but they're not what is most beautiful about your story. And they're not what is most beautiful and indicative about your heart. Tell me about your longings. Tell me about what you wanted when you were 14 years old and why you wanted it. And I will know something about the beauty of who you really are. And then there are your disappointments. It's not just desires, it's all the disappointments. What are the disappointments that have leveled you? These two speak volumes about your heart. They speak, your disappointments tell me who you are, and they tell me what matters to you. In other words, they reveal your core heart to me. Now, one of the most pivotal plot lines in your story, before moving on to the fourth category of themes, one more about plot lines. One of the most pivotal plot lines pertains to your relationship with God. In fact, the core story of your heart is the story of how you have interacted with God about your desires and about your disappointments. Even if you, and someone's saying, I don't believe in God, fine. Even if you don't believe in God, when you don't get something that you really want, when you are living with unmet longing, there is a felt sense that the cosmos has let you down. The world has let you down. And if you do believe in God, what happens inside your body when you risk longing for something and you risk hoping for something and it doesn't happen? It doesn't come to be. It doesn't materialize. Your fiance breaks off the engagement. Your boss passes over you for a promotion. Someone else has chosen to lead the thing that you really want to lead. Whatever it is, disappointments mark us. They mark us. And the way you respond to a particular disappointment often sets the trajectory for the next phase of your life. That's very important. Now, look, please don't hear this as, strong people bounce back from disappointments. Ugh, God, ugh. That's not what I'm saying. My point is this. If you are going to understand why your story has unfolded the way that it has, you have to look at how you have responded to your disappointments. How do you talk to God or engage with God or talk to yourself after you have been disappointed? Ultimately, all disappointments implicate God. Why? Because God is the one who could have intervened and didn't. If you look up, if you look up in an etymological dictionary, the etymology, the origin of the word disappointment, if you look that up, you will find that it originally meant to miss an appointment with someone. A disappointment is a broken meeting. It's a broken appointment. All disappointment carries with it the sense of a broken appointment with God. You expected God to show up and God didn't. Disappointment, broken appointment with God. God is the one who could have let you get into that college and God didn't. God didn't show up for me, didn't show up for you. God is the one who could have prevented that illness and God didn't. God didn't show up. Disappointment, broken appointment. You cannot know yourself until you have been willing to name the deepest longings of your heart and the most devastating disappointments of your life. More than anything else, your desires and your disappointments reveal who you are as a person. They reveal the uniqueness that is you, your desires and your disappointments. More than your Enneagram type, Myers-Briggs, any other personality instrument. Okay, your desires and your disappointments. To understand the unique way in which you reflect the glory of God, the thing that makes you, you, it's important to name what you really want, and it's important to name what has broken your heart. Most of our disappointments are ultimately about belonging or not belonging, i.e., exclusion. As relational beings who are created in the image of a triune relational God, you and I were built to belong. We are built to belong. Yet many of us have such unmet longings around belongingness. It's this sense of, where do I fit? Where do I belong? Where are my people? Why can't I find a small community, just a couple of people, where I can actually be my full self and be fully embraced in relationship? Okay, that's belonging. Where I can be Adam and I'm also embraced, enjoyed, welcomed, delighted in. There's a place at the table for me. There's a table and there's a place for me. That's belonging. Okay. Last, that was all under plot. Last, your story has themes. Over the course of your life, themes emerge. Now, those themes that are emerging in your story are different than the themes in my story. You may not be able to see the themes in your story yet, but they are developing. What do I mean? The theme of powerlessness, the theme perhaps of betrayal, the theme of how you have been repeatedly envied by others and what that has cost you. Here's the point. Your life story is far more epic than Hollywood's best offerings. There are more diverse settings, more significant characters, thicker plot lines, and more intriguing, well-developed themes than what Hollywood can bring. But why does your past story, even if all of that is true, why does it matter now? You know, you may be thinking, okay, so I have a story. How does that affect my present life? What's the big deal? The big deal is that your stories have shaped your brain more than anything else, which means that your stories from the past are shaping your present day-to-day experience of the world far more than you realize. You have an organ that is encased by your skull. It's called your brain. All right. How did your brain come to be what it is today? If you're 35, if you're 45, if you're 55, how did that organ that's encased in your skull come to be the way it is today? Because look, unlike other organs, kidneys, liver, stomach, your brain has changed massively over the past decades. as your story has unfolded, your brain, that organ called your brain, has changed massively. Why? Your kidneys haven't changed that much, okay? Your liver is basically the same as it's been. Why has your brain changed so much? Your brain is composed of billions and billions of neurons, and each individual neuron is connected to thousands of other neurons, which is kind of mind-boggling. When neurons connect to one another, they form what are called neural networks. Now, there are only two ways that neural networks develop. There are only two ways that connections are made between neurons: genes and life experiences. So when I speak of your stories, I am speaking of your brain. With the exception of the genes that were passed on to you, the composition of your brain is entirely a function of the experiences that you have had in life. Said another way, with the exception of the genes that have been passed on to you, the composition of your brain is entirely a function of your stories. Okay? If your brain has primarily developed in response to your stories, genes, life experience, don't you think it might be important to become an expert on those stories? At least two or three of them? Understanding your stories will allow you to know why your brain has been shaped the way that it has, which in turn will allow you to understand why you experience the world and especially relationships the way that you do. Okay, this is an oversimplification of how the brain processes present experience, but it's basically like this. Whenever you have an experience in the present, like this afternoon, the first thing your brain does is filter that present experience through all of your past experiences. As you experience the events of your day today, okay, your brain, what it's doing is it's filtering that experience that you're going to have this afternoon through all of your past experiences. That's how the brain operates. That's what neurons do. That's what neural networks do. Many people want to experience change. We want to grow as human beings. Good, good. Here's the dilemma. You are not going to experience meaningful heart level change until you engage your stories, your life experiences. Why? Why? Because change means that neurons link up differently with one another. Change means that neural networks have a different configuration today than they did yesterday. That's what change means neurobiologically. Change means that there is a shift in how the neurons in your brain connect with one another. You are not going to change deeply until you engage your neurons, which means that is synonymous with saying you are not going to change deeply until you engage the experiences you have had in life, which is to say, your stories.